the Start Your Own Business podcast. Hear inspiring startup stories and get reliable expert advice on how to start your business and get off to the best possible start. Brought to you by Startup Donut, helping small businesses succeed.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. My name's Fiona Pryor and you're listening to the Start Your Own Business podcast. Most businesses in the UK operate in a crowded, competitive market. If your business is to succeed, attracting customers and securing a good market share, you must stand out from your competitors. Having a memorable name and standout branding, however quirky or out there it is, will only get you so far. To truly set yourself apart from your competitors, you need to do other things that give customers a clear reason to choose you instead of one of your competitors. And be aware, setting yourself apart by competing on price is often a race to the bottom. There are many no-cost and low-cost ways you can set your business apart, and in this episode I'll be speaking to Chris Endersby, small business marketing expert and co-founder of London-based brand agency Firestarter. We'll be discussing what you can do to make your business stand out in a crowded, competitive market. But before we meet Chris, let's find out more about our sponsor, Lightyear. Life as a business owner can be unpredictable. You need a cash flow cushion for any bumps in the road. But this doesn't mean you need to leave your cash languishing in low interest accounts. Instead, you can earn a daily variable rate of 4.6% AER with Lightyear's business accounts. Lightyear make this possible by giving small businesses like yours a solution traditionally reserved for the big corporates. Money market funds, managed by the world's largest asset manager, BlackRock. These are low-risk investments, usually only accessible with a minimum deposit of £5 million. With Lightyear, you can access them with no minimum deposit criteria. There are no fees to open, bank transfer into, withdraw from, or maintain your business account, and your money is always easily accessible. You work hard for your income as a business owner. Lightyear lets your income work hard for you. So rather than spending weeks trying to open an account with low rates and high fees, open a Lightyear business account in one day and start putting your money to work. Whether you choose to manage your company's cash on Lightyear's slick app or the web platform, the interest you earn could mean you can hire a new employee or take that holiday you know you deserve. Visit lightyear.com/donut. That's donut. DONUT. To find out more and set up your account in just a few taps. And remember, when you invest, your capital is at risk. It's now time to meet our expert, Chris Endersby. Chris is the co-founder of London-based brand agency Firestarter. Hi there, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Fiona. Thanks very much for having me today. Thank you.
So today we're talking about standing out in the crowd. And for most businesses, it doesn't matter how old or newly established your business is or the size of your business. The fact is you're going to be competing with other businesses in the same sector as you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that with increasing digitization, globalization, the marketplace is becoming not only busier than ever, but also less defined than ever. So I think traditionally or historically, businesses might have been able to easily find a geographical basis of a location or some other niche for which they could be quite standalone and own that space. Whereas increasingly now your customers are, anywhere in the world. You're going to cross sectors, cross industries. So absolutely, I think it's something which is facing all businesses, large and small, and indeed new starters and new entrants and established businesses alike.
Yeah, so, you might think, well, I'm the only florist in my local area, but actually you're still going to be competing with supermarkets who sell flowers. You're also going to be competing with garden centres. So you're going to be facing competition from one corner or another, whatever your business is doing.
Absolutely. You're so right. And I think that although branding in itself has kind of quite a long track record now, we do tend to think back to those times where actually the brand would come from the person on the high street who everybody knew, who was the stationer, or to your example, who was the florist. And I think that's not a marketplace within which most businesses are operating these days. It's a very different reality for people commercially now.
So how important is it then for you to stand out?
So we would make a claim that it's probably the most important factor. So differentiation, which is perhaps another way of, just to make it more straightforward, another way perhaps of expressing how you communicate your unique value to your target audience, to your ideal customers. So when we talk about differentiation, standing out, what we're actually more talking about, I think, is what is your unique value? How is that unique value relevant to the people that are buying or wishing to kind of do business with you in some sense or another? And therefore, it's how you communicate that, which actually is what we're really talking about here, I think, when we talk about the topic of differentiation.
So you're saying it's essential that businesses do this. What are the risks if you don't?
So I think it's really hard, to get noticed in the first place. So to sort of rise above the noise, to come out of that background noise, given what we just said regarding how messy and how noisy marketplaces are generally for buyers. And then even if you do manage to come to the attention of somebody who wishes to buy from your service or a product, how are they going to make that buy decision? How are they actually going to know that their business is going to come your way, as opposed to the many other people that are likely to come to their attention as well? So from that perspective, both to come front of mind and then to give people the right triggers to buy from you. And I would also then add to keep buying from you, to build that loyalty and that trust over time, that we would suggest it's absolutely mission critical.
So can you think of some good examples that listeners might recognise of businesses that do it really well?
Yeah, so one of our, I suppose, approaches at Firestarter is we tend to fuse psychology and creativity in what we do. So therefore, we draw upon what we call archetypes. So it might be known within, but think storytelling. So brands that do a really good storytell and just connect with you at every level. So as someone who likes his motorbikes, the example I would provide personally would be like a Harley Davidson, for example. So it's that outlaw, rebellious motorcycling brand, but yet tend to be driven by gentlemen maybe of a slightly older age or ladies of a slightly older age. So it's something which is iconic within that sector. When you think about that type of motorbike, and I'm sure even for non-motorcyclists, they understand and can picture that image, but it tends to own that sector, and it does so in a way that's congruent, that's long-lasting. I think that it probably crosses generations now as well, because they've kept to that identity, and I think it's just something that is a real shortcut through. When people say that brand or see the brand visually, that all feels quite congruent, quite connected, and therefore I think they've done that amazingly well.
So what are the key areas that business owners need to look at if they want to stand out in their market? Okay,
so I think that I would suggest there's three really key components for differentiation and standing out in your market. I think the first thing is kind of that know thyself message.
Yeah.
So your differentiation and what you want to be standing out for and why you want to be standing out for that particular attribute is already within your business. And even for a startup, even for someone who doesn't have an established track record or loads of customers to go to, that why you set your business up, what problems and services you're trying to solve. So it's something that is innately within you. So I think that above all else, differentiation is not going to be found through looking at competitors in the first instance or looking out within the market. Differentiation comes from within. So that's the first key consideration. The second one, though, is that differentiation is kind of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. So that differentiation needs to be relevant to the people that you're trying to do business with. It needs to solve a problem for them. It needs to be something which they are going to value above other things. And it also needs to be something that's going to, like I said with that story, it's going to capture them. It's going to grasp hold of them in some way. So it's got to be relevant and it's got to resonate with them. So, there are many ways that you could be differentiated, but it needs to be differentiated in a way that's perceived to add value. Yeah. And then the third thing is that differentiation, we would suggest, is more of a kind of like a signpost, a direction of travel, rather than a weather vane that you're just going to kind of keep changing all of the time or keep uplifting. So expressing that in a way that sets that direction of travel, so how you position yourself over time, I think becomes really important, because then you build trust, because people know what you're about, they can identify with it, and they can begin to see that play out time and time again in what you do, what you say, and importantly, how you make your ideal customers feel about you and what you're about.
You've mentioned brand values already, but how can a small business use brand values to stand out?
Okay, so I always think about brand values as a kind of glue between where you aspire to be and what you're doing today.
Yeah.
So I think that approaching it in that very meaningful, basing those brand values around being the best version of yourself. Yeah. You're not trying to pick 5 perhaps quite predictable phrases, maybe like integrity or honesty or those kinds, because when you base your brand values around just things that other people expect, or that you believe that other people will expect, well, they're just permits to operate, really. They're just a license to be in that space. So I don't think many of us would want to knowingly do business with a company that didn't have integrity or wasn't honest or wasn't trustworthy. So I think seeing brand values as a way of communicating the best version of yourself based upon what you not only do day to day, but where you strive to be. So they want to push you forwards. They want to energize your team as you have them and you bring them on board, because very few, even small businesses, can do things on their own, entirely on their own. So you want to galvanize that energy in a direction of travel. And I think then when people can tap into that and they can associate and see you being the best version of yourself, then I think that's a way to win and retain hearts and minds of your customers.
And what about the actual branding of a business, and equally of your products? What is it that businesses can do with their branding to stand out?
Okay, so I think that we've already perhaps touched on a few of these points. So I think that starting off with that good self-knowledge, with that great sense of self-awareness, and putting then that in the context of your customers is a hugely valuable exercise to do, that doesn't necessarily cost too much money or isn't too demanding in terms of outlay. And when you have those clear foundations, then I think it's quite straightforward, simple messaging and having pieces that fit together and add value to each other, which can really begin to make a difference. You don't need to spend a significant amount of money up front on branding, collateral. You can make do with things at the start that set that direction, set that tone, give you a framework within which to operate. And I think we would suggest, it's a phrase that I'm sure you've heard a lot of in other contexts, but that minimum viable proposition brand. Yeah. Get something, get it working, and get it tested. And I think then over time, you'll understand from working with customers and engaging with prospects how to refine it, how to fine tune it, rather than thinking what we first need to do is get everything brand sort of ticked and bashed before we start. So I would suggest get a framework, get those building blocks in place, and then start talking to people, start testing it out, and then build it out and fulfill it and make it richer over time.
Is there the risk with people who are new in business for them to think that branding is about their logo and about their company name and about what their website looks like?
I think there is, and I think that that's only natural. And indeed, we have a constant debate, I think, with do people want a brand or do they want a website? Do they want a logo or do they want a brand? So I think that interplay is there and is a common way to think through. I think we would suggest that those are ways that the brand turns up, they're artifacts, they're assets that you're going to build up over time, and are, of course, going to become important for you as time goes through. But I will come back to that point about the key thing about brand is about how you want your customers and your prospects to think and feel about you. So I think whatever you can do that helps make that trusted, allows you to be remembered and have that recall is probably your focus. And of course, sometimes that's going to end up in a logo. It's going to end up with your website. It's going to end up with strap lines. But I think that's not where you should start. I think where you need to start is what you want to be known for and what you want people to think and feel about you.
Yeah, business names, like I've come across companies before where they've got kind of like a wacky business name, and businesses will use that as a way of trying to stand out. But that can be limiting and damaging sometimes if you get it wrong?
I think it's really tricky. And increasingly now, because it's so, when we work with companies who are either trying to establish a brand name for the first time or maybe rebranding, so, and as part of that, the name is up for debate. So it's really complicated as well these days. So you've got to think about issues regarding trademarking. So who already perhaps owns some phraseology or some colors or some wording around your brand. You've got to think about the designation of your website as a .com or a .io or a .co.uk. You've got to think about company's house. Does somebody also have that same brand name as you? So I think there's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of challenges within that process. But I think simple things still really work well. So perhaps if you'll indulge me, our own brand name, Firestarter, doesn't necessarily evoke branding as a topic or as an industry or as a product or service. But we think what it does hopefully invoke is that sense of energy, that sense of drive, that sense of sparking, and it allows us to be really playful with it, and it allows us to be really creative with it. But it doesn't necessarily have to have a direct association and meaning in a literal sense as to what you're trying to promote and sell. I think also sometimes, like Google, for example, I think it's quite well known, but that's a mistake. Yeah, that was a spelling mistake that they ended up being called Google in the way that they are. It was supposed to be a mathematical term. So never underestimate the chance for accidental innovation and accidental creativity, whereby you're going to come across something that actually is just going to land. Maybe it shouldn't, but sometimes you need to kind of take a faith that logic will only get you so far, and by being playful, innovative, creative, you can get far ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, but also we've seen this just this week, for example, with Aberdeen. I don't know if you're aware of So I would also argue taking vowels out of things may not necessarily be a surefire way of branding success. So ironically, what I found for Aberdeen is that they already had all of those trademarks. They already had the hundreds of years of equity within their brand. And you think if you were trying to set up a new company in that space, you might need to do something without the vowels to get yourself a place on a ranking or to get a URL that links. So perhaps think about it more in terms of what's meaningful and impactful and is going to resonate with your target audience, rather necessarily than something that is done for more sort of digital native reasons.
Yeah, for any of our listeners that aren't aware of the story, look up Aberdeen. It's quite interesting.
It is indeed. Removing ease.
Yeah, we had quite an interesting conversation with Greg Fraser of the Bottled Baking Company in an earlier episode of the podcast, and he said they chose their name because it summarised exactly what they did as a company. But he said as the business has grown and developed, it in some ways has become limiting because it's prevented them from perhaps migrating or expanding the business into other areas. So they've had to be creative in terms of the other kind of offshoots of their business. So I think it's a really important thing to consider.
Absolutely. But again, I think when you're starting, don't be fearful that you are stuck with that thing in a negative way forever. We have a lot of businesses who built a track record, have done amazingly well, and they themselves are well placed to judge when even a name change might not necessarily even hold them back, but might accelerate them forwards, and to celebrate that. And you can see that brand that you had or that name that you had was fit for purpose and got you to where you are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be the one that's going to take you forwards to your next stage of growth. So I think don't be fearful of it. Embrace it when you're starting up a new business. Get it good enough. Get it working. Make sure you're not going to get a lawyer's letter. Or if you do, how are you going to respond to it? And then, as I said, you know, nothing is fixed forever. So you have the opportunity to refine and revise these things as you go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Customer service. I wanted to talk to you about that because that's another way that a lot of businesses will try and set themselves apart from other people in their field.
It is. And I think it's a really tricky one, this one. So I think customer service is one of these ones with a significant downside and not a huge upside in itself. So if you think about Google reviews or Trustpilot or these many other services now, it is very easy to lose your brand equity and your reputation based upon customer service. That's so easy to do now. Sometimes these things go viral as well, as I'm sure everyone lives with. I think, though, it's quite tricky to on customer service itself to get the upside, because a lot of people are trading on customer service. It's something you don't actually get to experience until you buy it. So it's very difficult. It's quite personal. So in a sense, what you or I might perceive as customer service could be quite different in terms of even when we're making the same purchase. So I think there is, however, if you think of it more about customer experience, so the service kind of implies what you do. The customer experience piece implies kind of how is it received and how is it experienced by your customers. So then you can begin to think about how do the different components fit together to become more than the sum of their parts in the eyes of your customers. So focusing, I think, on customer experience is probably a more surefire way of success, while recognizing that bad customer service can very quickly undo a lot of hard work.
Yeah, like you say, especially now in the days of social media, where you can have a bad experience at a restaurant, you pop it on your Facebook, you do a bad review, and there's a certain amount of trust that we put in kind of online reviews. If you want to stay in a hotel, you look at the reviews that people have given. So actually, that, like you say, the downside, it's when things go wrong that it can be expensive.
Absolutely. And I also think, unfortunately, these days, there's also mistrust within some of those customer service reviews as well. Has this been bought? Is it real? How do we identify that? So really think about how to give that great customer experience. And that may come from combining, as I say, different things that in themselves may not be significant. But when you put that package together, that's when you can really begin to shift the dial.
So I think, small businesses will think, setting myself apart, that's got to be expensive. But that's not necessarily the case, is it? It can be really low cost and in some cases no cost.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that gets back to what I said about the fact that realising that what sets you apart is probably there already. If you're a startup, it's maybe in where you're positioning yourself going forwards, and it's in that aspiration and in that direction of travel, and in that sense of either frustration with how things are done today and building kind of a following regarding that, or in a sense of opportunity regarding how things could be different. So understanding that story and building out that narrative is something that doesn't necessarily cost money. I think the other thing to say is that don't underestimate the value of talking to others who you're wishing to interact with. So go out, talk to prospects, go out, talk to customers who may be, with you already on your journey. Find out what it is from them that they highly value. So that's free customer experience sort of consultancy, really. You will also, if you do that well, you'll get other benefits. You may get testimonials out of that in a sense you can then begin to kind of like provide those social proofs. And you can also demonstrate to them at your early stage that you're in partnership with them. You value their views, that, you want to service them. So it can be these very low cost options that actually can provide those kind of foundation stones, those building blocks for whatever you might then choose to spend money on in the future. But,
I would also argue that it's probably worth speaking to lapsed customers as well, because they can point out the areas where you haven't delivered on what your brand has promised to them as a customer.
Absolutely. And lapsed customers, and also I think being prepared to have conversations when things didn't go well with your customers. I think that demonstrating you don't have to lose that customer because, particularly if you're a startup, because you're learning and you're growing. And I think that the opportunity to salvage relationships and potentially even strengthen them through honest discussions regarding lapses, to your earlier point within customer service, I think there you can build trust, you can build that longevity. And I think people recognize often that they do want to support growth, they do want to support that. And those honest conversations, I think can be helpful. But so rekindling old customers, or engaging where perhaps you recognise things haven't worked out as well as you can, I think can be invaluable too.
What about things like having a commitment to quality and excellence? Is that important?
I think absolutely, so long as you can back it up. I think that's the key thing. So I think as to my earlier point, I think if your operations are, let's say, fledgling or messy, or you're working things through, I think over committing to, that excellence or speed and service or something might put you on a collision course when those problems do arise. So I think that if you have clear competencies and a part of that value chain and, you're able to deliver that in such a way, then absolutely. But otherwise, I think when it comes to those things, being clear regarding your direction of travel and the reality of what you're having to do, I think customers will form a better and deeper connection with you over promising, and then unfortunately circumstances beyond your control, perhaps, meaning you just can't deliver.
Yeah, letting people down.
Exactly.
Not good. What about things like innovation and launching new products or expanding where your business is going? How important is that to businesses?
I think innovation is super, super important. And you'll see as well, there's a lot of funding and there's a lot of recognition with R&D research credits and other pieces that go in. But what I would though say is that innovation, again, is one of these things that's almost kind of expected now, that we are innovating, we are doing something different. We tend to use the term ingenuity over innovation. And I think that it's therefore, the reason why we do that is because almost all of our companies, and indeed ourselves included, have constraints. We have limitations. We have things that we're butting up against, whether it's time, cost, money, market access, intellectual property, kind of crowding around you. So thinking about creativity, thinking about ingenuity, thinking about how to overcome those constraints, or even potentially to turn those into a form of competitive advantage, I think is allows you to transform how you're operating for the good. The alternative, you say, well, we haven't got enough money, or we haven't got enough time, or we don't have the market access that we require. So yes to innovation, but perhaps don't, in that more scientific, incremental product and service journey, don't also miss the opportunity to think, how can we work with our constraints? How can we work with those challenges and turn those into something that may be fruitful and that may be transformational?
Yeah, because the reality is that most small businesses haven't got loads of resources swishing around that they can turn to focus on innovation. They haven't got the money, they haven't got the staff, they haven't got the time. So
absolutely. And I think sometimes as well, those constraints strangely can be your savior. So for example, you can spend a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of either your own funds or those of an investor on developing products, services, features, benefits, more and more coding of a particular solution.
Yep.
And I'm not for a moment suggesting that isn't important to do, but along that journey, thinking about who are our target market, all the things that we've been speaking about today, going hand in glove alongside that, I think can potentially save you money.
Yeah.
Because if we just think about, we spoke about, talking to prospects or talking to customers at a very early stage, they can provide those light bulb moments that are just going to transform something, put you slightly in a different direction, or maybe even pivoting entirely, as opposed to that could be tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds of product development without having spoken to anybody or trialed something or put a beta version out there. So innovation, great, but think about how you can work really positively with the constraints that may come along with that.
Small businesses are often tempted, I think, to try and compete on price, and that's a deadly approach, isn't it, for small businesses where they haven't got volume or the purchasing power of larger rivals?
I mean, it's really tempting to do, particularly because often they're the buying signals that we ourselves see from those established companies. So introductory offers, bulk discounts, and all those things that effectively are going to erode your profit margin before you've even got profit, particularly for startups. You're operating in circumstances where, unfortunately, large established companies will operate in a way that they can afford to do loss leaders. They can afford to, particularly when combating new entrants such as yourselves, they can afford to operate in a way that will be anti-competitive, unfortunately, and you may not be able to. You've got to be in business long enough to turn a profit, and I think it's very hard to do that by leading on price. When you're established, when you have that track record, when you have economies of scale and all the other pieces that you have bought and paid for over time, then you may consider to differentiate on price. But I think for most, if not all startups, unless you happen to have demonstrated a way of delivering significant value in the eyes of your customers by, for example, a paradigm shift in removing all manual processing, as some people with AI tools, for example, may do, or by looking to a nearshoring or an offshoring type basis that still allows you to be profitable, I think price alone is a really dangerous strategy, particularly for a startup. So when you've made it, when you're there and your business is incredibly well established and, other factors become important, then maybe price. But I think that it's really, really tricky for most, if not all, startups.
I was reading a sustainable consumer report last week, and I was struck by the numbers of consumers now who are driven by what we might have called perhaps 5-10 years ago kind of eco-friendly, sustainable products and services from businesses. But that has changed how consumers buy these days. They're making decisions on different grounds now. So is it a good move for businesses to try and kind of fit with that new sort of buying drivers for consumers?
So I think understanding your customers obviously is always a good thing. Yeah. So knowing what those behaviours are, and as we said, kind of going out and asking, or finding out what is driving people's buying behaviour, I think is quite important. But I think sustainability, it's a bit like when we mentioned on values. I think a lot of this stuff tries to align to being the best version of ourselves. So if we are making great strides in and around sustainability, of course, let's be judged by our actions. Let's be judged by what we do. And let's, over time build up that track record that's important to back that up.
Yeah.
But I think doing so to acquire customers in a way that doesn't fit with who we are and what we're about and what we're actually doing, I think that we have to give our customers the same, I suppose, respect that we would wish to be given as customers. And I think if it feels inauthentic, incongruent, if there's nothing to back it up, I think you're likely to do more damage than good in terms of taking that approach. If, however, it's something that people can see you making strides towards and they can actually see it manifested in what you do and how you operate, then I think absolutely. But as I said, I think your behaviours come before your words when it comes to things like sustainability.
Yeah, so it's about being authentic to yourself and that, fully expect that your customers will see through it if it doesn't ring true.
Absolutely, and I think there's many a corporate example at least where I call it by the phrase I use is sort of strong views loosely held. So they're all very well and we see it now with political changes, within administrations where large programs, whether it's BP going back away from green energy or whether it's companies abandoning DEI pledges. I mean, time will tell what the reputational damage is of those companies who, as I say, make very strong and bold statements on one side, and then a changing climate leads them to swiftly abandon those.
So talking about your business then, what do you do to stand out in your market?
Okay, so I think that our particular IP, our particular niche of this combination of ingenuity and creativity on the one side with psychology on the other, I really believe offers a powerful differentiation, particularly to the audience that we work with, who tend to be established startups and scale-ups, because those kind of capabilities are often only found in much larger branding agencies and full-service creative agencies. So we're able to offer that in a very compact and agile and hopefully cost-effective manner for those people that we're working with. But I think that it's, as I said, it's that attitude, it's that energy. So the name Firestarter and all that evokes, we recognise that we want to work together with our customers to deliver that, but on particularly strong insights that we bring. And I'm blessed certainly to work with Mickey Wilson, who's the other co-founder of Firestarter. And I sort of suggest that we have the kind of the art and science there of branding, with myself from psychology, thinking much more about that data, evidence-based, logic-based approach, trying to codify and perhaps demystify branding. Yeah. With then my business partner, Mickey, just doing things that even I find to be quite unfathomable creatively and artistically. And I think it's that fusing of things. And I think that would also be sorry to go off tangent, but I think to find a proposition and a business partner and a product service that fuses things that are in themselves uniquely valued, but bring them together, create something that's almost unassailable, I think can be a real winner, because rather than two people from the same industry or two people with the same skill set, perhaps think about how you can surround yourself with people who have contrasting skills, contrasting worldviews, bring that together, and I think you can create something hopefully transformational for people.
We've covered loads of ground there in the last 25 minutes or however long it is that we've been talking. Can you boil down the things that we've covered to 3 top tips that you would give to small businesses for standing out in the crowd?
Absolutely. Start with who you are. I think that's the absolute key one. Don't look for competitors and what they're doing as your first point of reference. Start with who you are. Start with what you want to be, and recognize in almost all certainty that point of differentiation already exists. So it's not something you're looking for externally to you. It's something you're trying to uncover from what lies within. So have that self-belief, have that self-confidence that you will find it. But accept the fact that it sounds simple, but it's actually, not the easiest thing in the world to do. So don't give yourself a hard time if that takes some time and takes some iterations. The second thing I would say is, although you're looking inwards, please remember that it's how that value is perceived by others, the relevance to them, how it resonates to them. So do take time to put yourself in the shoes of your customers, or as I said, go and talk to prospects or customers, because it needs to resonate, it needs to be relevant. And then the third thing is, think about what you can do day in, day out to bring that together in a way that's consistent, coherent, congruent. So that doesn't have to be huge sort of statements and big ticket events. It's much more, what are you doing day in, day out that's going to bring that UVP, bring that unique value proposition to life? And I think if you can get those 3 things right, if you get the consistency, the customer focus, and that internal sense of who we are, what we stand for, that authenticity, then I think you'd be so well placed to get out there and make value out of what you're about and who you're trying to solve and serve for.
That's fantastic. Before I let you go, can you tell listeners where they can find you and where they can find out more about Firestarter, please?
Yes, so firestarter.live. So hopefully that works. We're going through the process of recreating our own website, which, as I'm sure you can tell for a branding agency, is perhaps the least fun thing we can do. So very pleased to see there. Both myself and Mickey are on LinkedIn. And I actually have to give a shout out, but I hope this is okay, I'm not sponsored in any way, but we're also members of Homegrown Club, which is a club for entrepreneurs, startup businesses, and that whole ecosystem that's based in Marble Arch in London. And I think certainly as we were going through COVID and all those other times, I'm sure lots of people listening to the podcast will appreciate that sometimes setting up and running a business can be quite a lonely undertaking and often quite a demanding one. So we also are often there as well. We do a lot of business there and with people there. So I think find an ecosystem that supports you. Online at firestarter.live, on LinkedIn, but also say in the real world at places like Homegrown Club in London.
That's fantastic. We'll add links to all of those for the summary notes too. But thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting to talk to you. It's been great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
If you've been operating under the assumption that you have no competitors, I think we can safely say that Chris has put that notion to bed. As a small business, you need to give your target customers a reason to choose you over the other players in your space. And Chris has explained how you can set your business apart by drilling down on identifying what you and your business stand for and telling your story in a way that's authentic. He's also cautioned against trying to compete on price or by using claims that just don't ring true. We'll be sharing links to Chris and his company Firestarter alongside some handy related content in the summary notes that accompany this episode. And you can also find out more about our sponsor, Lightyear. You'll find the summary notes at www.startyourOwnbusinesspodcast.co.uk. Before you head off, if you're enjoying the show, please hit follow. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, follows on the top right of the show page. And if you're listening via Spotify, follows just under our logo. Hitting follow will make sure you're notified about new episodes as soon as they're released, and it also helps us reach more small businesses just like you. All that remains is for me to thank Chris for his great tips and advice today. Until next time, all the best.